We have a young man in our midst who have grown up here. God has blessed him. God has raised him up. Amen. And listen, this morning he's going to share the spiritual food, but I'm sure he also has an announcement with respect to some physical food as well. All right? So ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together. Let's welcome Pastor Todd, our next generation pastor, who's going to come and share God's word. Amen.
Bless you guys. All right. So today, how many of you love seeing the next generation up here this morning? Isn't it amazing? So today after church, they are going to be having a bake sale in the back. It's to help raise funds for our trip to Syracuse, where they are going to be doing their ministry, whether it's singing, dancing, drama. So if you can, please come out, support the youth ministry, buy a baked good. All donations are welcome, and we're so grateful for it. So thank you all in advance. Now today, it is an honor to be up here. The last time that I was up here was on October 27th, and it was on that day where I was able to speak on a word that God gave to me. And it was about Joseph and how he went through this whole process to eventually get to where he was supposed to go. And that message was titled, "How do you get out of your prison?" So now we're out of the prison. And these past couple of weeks, God has been touching me, whether it's through youth ministry or right up here in the platform. So we're going to connect it all together. So for the stuff that you guys don't see is during youth ministry, I haven't been speaking so that I could allow God to just use me for this day. And during our youth ministry, we've had our own team. They were the ones doing the messages. So a couple of weeks ago, we had our very own Becky. She talked about how to encounter God. Then the week after that, we had Antoine, who spoke about who is Jesus. And then just this Friday, we had Caleb, who talked about the Good Samaritan, how to be compassionate. And just last week, we had our very own Pastor Patrick up here talk about do not be up here for an impression, but leave an influence. So today, we're going to continue onward from that and everything that I've witnessed with the youth ministry, and we are going to focus on today's topic. And today's topic is you're not here for the moment, you're here to create a movement. So when you think of moment, so right now, at first you probably think moments are good. So the definition of moment, so moment is a very brief period of time, and it also means important. So it's like moment, boom, that's it, that's a moment. Whereas a movement is an act of changing physical location or position or having this change. So moments happen like this, snap of the finger, whereas movement is something that continuously starts to occur. You start going in a direction. So let me just give you some examples of moments versus movements. So when we think about it in our own lives, we probably reflect on moments in our life. So if you're married, great example. You look at a moment, the marriage, the day I got married, our wedding, great moment. Sounds good. But movement thinking would be, you know what? We look at the moment, which was the actual marriage, but the movement is the marriage. Did you guys have arguments together? Okay. If you did have arguments, are you growing? Did you get through it? Are you moving towards a direction where you're saying, you know what, we're praying together, we're loving each other, we're going in a different direction? That would be movement. It's not really so about the day you got married, but it's everything else that follows. Same thing with kids. One of the greatest days in my life is having a child. Sounds good. Great moment. But movement would be not just being there to say, my kid accomplished this in school, and they're a track star, and they have these trophies and trophies, but a movement would be like, you know what? I may not have been the best parent, but I grew. I changed diapers. I grew as a parent. I was there. I was there from them for when they were little. I was there with them when they were adolescents all the way to where they grew up. So that would be there. And you were there. You weren't absent. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I'm a parent, but if you were an absent parent and you just leave your parents, if you're an absent parent, but you just leave your kids at your parents' house and you go out and do your own thing, and you're not really parenting, but you're really a parent because you're saying, hey, look at me, I had a child, it's this and that, but you're not really being a parent, then there's really no movement to that. So it's a big difference. And even within the church world, great moments. And one of the things that I have learned when I started this process of becoming a credentialed minister is I went to these meetings where there were these big pastor meetings on Long Island. And one of the things I had learned is from a conference right here on Long Island that when I met these other pastors, they had a speaker, and the speaker said that, tell me about yourself. How are things going? And the very first thing that people tend to do is they say, oh, things are going good. Church is going great. Oh, we had, let's just say 5,000 members. Offering is through the roof. This and that. Sounds good on paper, but there's really nothing to it. That's just a moment. But movement would be, thinking would be like, okay, you have all these members, you have all this, tithing is up, all these things sound like they're good, but how many people did you lead to the Lord? And then there's crickets. What are you doing now? Same thing if you are a ministry leader, just gonna put it out there, if you're a ministry leader or you're in a church, oh, we had this event. Sounds good, right? Yes. How many people came to the event? We had 50 people come. We have 100 people come. I need more money. Hey, office, I need more money. I need more money so that we can do events. But then you're doing events, and then when you do one event and you have all these people, but then no one gets saved, is that really important? At that point, it just becomes fluff, and nobody likes fluff because it's nothing. There's no substance to it. So we need to get out of that thinking and go deeper beyond that and start stop thinking about these moments and start thinking about movements. Or here's another situation, and it's more practical. So moment thinking is you've been in the church a long time, and I'm going to go there. So you've been in the church for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? They don't play enough gospel music here. They don't. All they seem to play is contemporary Christian music. And here's the worst ones. I can't believe that some people in church would wear jeans on stage. They would wear sneakers. They would wear sweatshirts, and they would wear hats. The nerve of them. I was always taught that when you go to the church, you don't wear a hat. The nerve of them. But then all of a sudden, you're stuck in that moment because you're stuck on what's on the outside. You're stuck on the hat. But movement way of thinking would be like, you know what? They might look a little different. They might sing something different. They might dress different. But you know what? Maybe the way they're dressed, there might be somebody that's coming through that door. And when they're coming through that door, they're going to be wearing a cap, or they're going to be wearing ripped jeans, or they're going to be wearing a sweatshirt. So are we going to be the ones that be like, I don't want them here? Or are we going to embrace them? That's ministry. And to be honest, the moment, and these are for the members, so if you're attendee, it's different. But for the people who are actual members at this church, you believe in a philosophy that we are, our mission statement, that we believe that we are building a diverse community of believers that will change the world. And you're also believing within our convictions, and some of our convictions are unity, diversity. So building a diverse community means that some people are going to come through the doors. They might speak Chinese. They might speak Spanish. They might speak Spanglish. They might speak French. They might look different. They might be black. They might be Guyanese. They might smell dirty. They might be drunk. They might be drug addicts. But we don't turn them away. We bring them in. And that's true ministry. So we need to start building ourselves to get to that point. And to be honest, when Jesus was making the framework of the church, he wasn't there to say, you know what, I just want the best of the best here. I just want the people who are holier than thou and those who look great and they wear a suit and they dress nice. No, Jesus was there when he was making the framework of the church. He was hanging out with the people who existed outside of his culture. He was hanging out with people who were disease-ridden. He was hanging out with people who were crippled. He was with people that society had declared unworthy. And he was with people with bad reputations and people who had bad morals and bad lifestyle choices. People who were lost or in pain, and even within his own circle. So if you look at his inner circle, disciples, and the people that he broke bread with daily, he was with people who were just normal. And that's how we need to be. So he didn't look what was on the outside, he looked at what's in. And if we are to be Christians, we need to exemplify that same Christ-like mentality. Because at the end of the day, what are we here for? We're here to be like Christ. So we shouldn't be so judgmental, and we shouldn't be at a point where we get caught up in all these little things like we're a Pharisee. So what's a Pharisee? It's like those people, the ancient Jewish people who felt they were self-absorbed and self-righteous and they looked down on others. But that's not who we are. We need to really be there, because at the end of the day, we're all here for the mission. We're all here for the Great Commission. And what is that? To go out there and make disciples of all nations. It doesn't say just make disciples of people who look like me. It doesn't say to make disciples of people who dress like me, but it's to make disciples of everyone. So we need to bring it all together so that we can build the church. And who is the church? We are the church. And also, you shouldn't look down upon anybody else, because it says in Matthew 7:1, it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And whatever measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look at a plank in your own eye? Hypocrite. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then when you see clearly, to remove the speck from your brother's eye." So church, we're not here to be judgmental, like I told you before, but we're here to bring it in. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if people dress different. It doesn't matter if we have people who wear caps, or they wear jeans, or they wear sneakers, because those old traditions that you might have held on to, it might have been good. It was all right. There was a time where, you know what, you had to be a certain way. But culture is changing. Society is changing. But you know what doesn't change? The mission. The mission doesn't change. So even though methodology and things like that, they might change, at the end of the day, we're all going towards one end goal, and that's to make disciples. And as long as we continue to move in that direction, then we're doing our job. So don't get caught up in the fluff, in the here and now. Because if you get caught up in the fluff, it's not worth anything. But quite often, people look at those moments and they see them as being so important. I'm here for the moment. I'm here for my moment. I'm here for me. That's just being self-absorbed. Or you look at other people and you're like, you know what? I see that person and they look like they pray so good, and I feel like I gotta pray and match them. Or I need to put myself out there and I need to sing a certain way so people can look at me because I'm singing. And let me tell you something. Those people who might be singing, nothing against people, or praying, but you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So people can be praying a certain way, but guess what? they're here and they're praying one way and it looks good, but behind closed doors, Jesus doesn't even know who they are. Or you could be singing a certain way, but they don't have that same attitude outside the doors when they're singing, and they're not listening to what God wants them to do. See, here's a little sentence for you guys. We're not here for the show, but we're here to grow. Same way is that you shouldn't be doing things for the gram, but you should be doing things to build the fam. So that's why we're here. We're here to build the church, and we're here to build community. So here are the differences. So you have moment thinking and movements. So I broke it down into two different things. So when you think of moment, and there's all these words with C. When I think of the word moment, that brings up moment to me. Moment thinking brings about complacency. Like you like where you are. You don't want to branch out. You're just there. Moment thinking brings about contentment. Like, okay, I'm content. I don't really want to challenge myself. I'm just happy. I'm just there. Moment thinking brings about comfortability. You don't want to get dirty because you're too relaxed. You like where you're at. And moment thinking brings about cockiness and conceitedness. You're just there. You're self-absorbed. You're stuck into who you are. You're caught up in your own moment, in your own thinking, where it's, look at me. I'm the man or I'm the woman. But movement thinking brings about commitment. I got skin in the game. I'm going to do this with my whole heart. Movement thinking brings about community. We're building everybody up. We're building the church. Movement thinking brings about confidence. You're not afraid to stand up, be bold, and share the gospel. Movement thinking brings about cohesion. We're all working together for a purpose. Movement thinking brings about cooperation. We're just working together in general. Movement thinking brings about, and this is a big word that you have heard in our church, and I want to give a shout out to everyone who's part of these ministries because this is really dealing with people. But movement thinking brings about compassion, care, being able to say, you know what, I'm going to just put myself aside and be there for someone else. And this is why I'm so thankful for the ministries that Pastor Mike oversees, whether it's divorce care, being there for people after they're not together no more and that you help them on, being there for hospital visits when people are sick, that you're there to visit them when they need you the most, being there for a grief share when, you know what, I lost somebody in my life and I need someone to talk to. It's like, boom, this is how we move on. Being there for Care Portal where, you know what, I'm willing to help somebody else and somebody else has a need and I'm going to go out there and put myself there to be there for that need. That care and compassion is important. And the biggest thing with movement brings about change. And when you have change, you start growing and you start going to a different direction. And it's a change for the better. So then it becomes not about, oh, I go to church, but it's, I'm in church. I'm really becoming a disciple. I'm sharing the gospel. I'm taking that next step seriously. So change is a good thing. So now it brings us to a question. In order to create a culture of movement, we need to examine ourselves with two questions. So this is the question I want to ask you all. Do we need to be touched by Jesus? So do we need to be touched by Jesus, or do we need to touch Jesus? So big difference. I'll say it again. Do we need to be touched by Jesus, or do we need to touch Jesus? So this is being touched by Jesus. And we're going to look at two stories within the Bible. And both stories within this Bible speak about leprosy. So what exactly is leprosy? Leprosy is a severe and contagious skin disease. And You can do your own research, your further research on how to deal with how it should have been treated. You can go to Leviticus 13, look at verses 45 to 46, or you could go to Leviticus 14 to look at the process that it took to be purified from it. But to break it down, people who had leprosy, they needed to like have their hair, it had to be a mess. Their mouths had to be covered, and they had to scream out the words, unclean. In order to get out of the status of leprosy, they need to go through a purification process, which could only be done by the priest. Once the priest went through the entire process and saw that everything was good, they had the whole process. Like I said, you can look at it in Leviticus 14. These people could be let back into society. So let's go to our very first reading. If you all want to turn to Luke 17, verses 11 to 17. Give you a couple moments to get there. Now, this is I'm reading out of the New King James Version. Now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. Then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off. And then they lifted their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. So when he saw them, he said to them, go show yourselves to the priest. And so it was as they went, and they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned, and with a loud voice glorified God, and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks. And he was a Samaritan. So Jesus answered and said, were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the other 9? Were there not any found who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, arise, go your way. Your faith has made you well. So Jesus ended up healing the 10 lepers, right? And one came back to give him praise, to be thankful. But here's the thing that we need to understand. The one that came back was a Samaritan. So the one that came back was the foreigner. And the Jews and the Samaritans, they didn't get along. So the people who were like his own people, the 9 that got cleansed, they weren't nothing. But only one came back to give thanks. So what does that tell us? Is that those 9 people were the ones that were within the society. They were the ones who were like there. They weren't the foreigner. So, as I mentioned earlier, what happens if you have that one person comes in, right? And it's like the drunk, or it's the person wearing a cap, or it's the person that looks different. And they're the ones who don't know how the church operates or whatever. If they come in through these doors and they're looking for help, are we going to shun them away just because they're different? See, that's how the church in itself gets a bad reputation. Because you have people who are broken, people who are hurting, people who are coming through these doors looking for a solution, and we're very quick to be judgmental, to look down upon them. And we shouldn't be like that. We should be able to embrace them in. But when we don't embrace them in, they're going to leave, and they're going to go somewhere else where they're going to feel like they get treated better. But we shouldn't be like that, because at the end of the day, we're the church. So we need to build them up. The same way is that 9 of these people, Jewish, 1 foreigner. So why is it that the foreigner had to be the one to say, you know what, I'm grateful, but what about the other 9? Because if the other 9 knew everything, they should have been like, you know what, I'm grateful too, but they just went about their business like it didn't matter. We shouldn't be like that. And it brings us to the next story, Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 45. Now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him, saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Then Jesus, moved with compassion, say that word again, compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once, and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest," because showing yourself to the priest was the way, "and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded, as a testimony to them." However, he went and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. So you have this leper, and he says, "You know what? He needs to be cleansed. Master, cleanse me." And Jesus goes, "You know what? I'm willing. You're cleansed." And then Jesus told him, "Listen, don't tell anybody." So, but the man went about and he started to proclaim it freely anyway. But this reminds me of something. So how many of you have been in a situation where you said, "You know what? I need to be touched by Jesus." And by the way, there's no wrong or right answer here. So whether you need to be touched or whether you need to touch Jesus, just different ways of thinking. But how many of you have been in a situation where you said, "You know what? I need to be touched by Jesus"? And here it is. And there's a lot of different places where you can be touched by Jesus. It could be in a hospital. "Oh, Lord, save me. Please get me out of this mess." If you touch the doctor's hands and you have him, just heal me, I'll never do such and such again. But then you end up doing it again anyway. Or you get locked up. Whoever got locked up before. You get locked up, and you're in the back of the police car, and you're handcuffed. "Lord, I'll never do this again. I'm so sorry. Just get me out of this situation." And he gets you out of the situation, but then you become a repeat offender, and you do it again and again and again anyway. Here's what you need to understand about needing to be touched by Jesus, is that most of the time, Jesus gives you're talking to Jesus. So whether it's in your prayers or whatever you do, you're talking to Jesus. And most of you just want to just talk, and we as people, we talk. We tell Jesus what we need, this and that, and he ends up giving it to us. He blesses us. He gives us what we ask for. But when you talk to Jesus, it shouldn't be a one-way conversation. It needs to be a two-way conversation. So you need to be in a point where you say, "You know what? I can talk to Jesus, but I'm at a point where I need to listen to Jesus." So it's a difference. A lot of people can talk, but a lot of people have a lot of issues when it comes to listening. And sometimes you're so quick to get what you want, and then you start running away, where Jesus is giving you other directions, and you're not listening to that because you're already about your business. So even in that story, he gives the strict instruction, don't say nothing to anyone, but then he went about and did it anyway. Are we like that sometimes? Where, you know what? Jesus, this is what I'm going to do, and this and that, and you already made it up in your mind, but then he's pulling you in a different direction, but you're not applying it. It reminds me of back in the day. So back in the day where, or for me, I remember being at a point where I was in this dead-end job. And the Lord, at that point, before I got married, he gave me a girlfriend who ended up being my wife. So he gave me a girlfriend, and who ended up being my fiance, who ended up being Rosemary. But she said, "Why are you in this job? You could do better." But I was too caught up in my moment. And because I was caught up in my moment, I was acting a little conceited. I was acting a lot of those words that I mentioned before. Comfortable. I was content. I was complacent. But Jesus was using Rosemary at the time to say, you know what? You can do better. I have something better to you. And through her, he was giving me like an answer. But I wasn't listening to it because I was stuck in my ways of what I wanted to do. And it got to a point where I just kept relaxing and kept sitting on it and kept doing what I wanted to do because I thought, you know what? Money was good. Things were great. I was happy. I didn't want to expand beyond myself. And it was good until he took it away from me. And he had to break me for a bit. And he had to break me to a point where I was out without a job for 2 months. So it's 2 months of being like, you know what? Why didn't I listen? So when he tells you something, you need to listen. The same way, you can go to him at any point. It's not like back in the day where you have the cell phone and you have your minutes and you have to wait till after 9 o'clock to make the call because be like, oh, no, you can go to Jesus whenever you want, and he's willing to answer you. And it may not be the answer that you want, but it's going to be the answer that you need. So you just need to apply it. So the best thing is that you can talk, but you need to be able to listen. And when you listen, then you can apply it to yourself. Or perhaps you need to be at a point where you need to touch Jesus. And this is just a little side thing. It brings you to Matthew 7:8, where it says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who seeks finds to him. And whoever knocks, it will be open. So when you are asking for something, when you are seeking for something, it's a 3-step process. You ask. Okay, you ask, it's going to be given. But after you ask, it is given, you still have to seek him. You still have to seek in order to find it. And then after you find it, you need to be able to knock and continuously be knocking because you're so hungry for it that you want that door to open. You have to be like a salesman or those people that are knocking at the doors or the people who just bother you. That's how you need to be when it comes to Jesus. You need to continuously ask, seek, and knock. It's not just a ask and you're done with it. It's not a seek, oh, thank you. No, you need to be hungry. You need to be desperate. You need to be a go-getter, and you need to go chase after him. And that brings us to the other story for touching Jesus. So Luke 15:11-32. And I know you all heard the stories because all these stories are something that you may have heard. But we're just going to throw it out there because with the season coming of Easter season, and we know what Jesus did for us on the cross, these are very important stories that he has told us for what reason? Because he wants us to get something out of it. And it's just practical ministry. That's the word that we always use. Practical ministry. And this is a story, you heard it, about the prodigal son. So NKJV, it says in verse 11, then he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me a portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and journeyed to a far country. And there he wasted his possessions with prodigal living. He was just spending his money crazy. Because you know how it is. How many parents we have in the room? Now, how many parents know that if your kids work hard for some money, they're not going to spend their money. They're not going to spend that money that they worked hard for. But if you give them money, that money's going to go quick. It's going to go because they didn't earn it. So you have the son who gets all this money and he starts spending it. So he wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed the swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father, but he was still a great way off. So at that point, he knew he had nothing left. He felt, you know what? I did everything I could in the world. I spent all my money. So you know what I need to do at this point? I was better off being where I was with my father. So at this point, he's saying, you know what? Despite everything that I have done, I need to just go back, and I just need to see my father. I just need to get a touch. I just need to touch him. And the fact is when he came back to his father, and he was a great ways off, so he was far away from his father. He wasn't quite there yet. His father saw him, so he went to go touch his father, but his father saw him and had, here's the word again, compassion. And he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they begin to be merry. So at this point, the son comes back home. He returns, and it's just like somebody that's coming back into the fold, or somebody new, and they're coming back right there. They're going to where they need to be, and you're embracing them. You're embracing them. Just like when somebody gets saved, you know what Jesus is doing in heaven? Embracing them. They're rejoicing. They're throwing a big party. If it's put it in terms, we're eating good. We're breaking balloons open. We're doing everything because it's such a joyous occasion. And we should be welcoming that new person, or welcoming that person back with open arms because they came back. So that's a victory. But then the other side of the story, and this could be the Christian who's in their own moment, or the ones who have been there and they're with the Father, or they're in the church, or they've been there and they're stuck in their own way, saying, now the older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house, and he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat, that I may make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me. All that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. See, that's like people who are in the church. And the thing is, or the people that are in the church and you're there for the show, it's like, when am I, as the saying is, when am I going to get mines? So when am I going to get mines? Yeah, that's what people say. When am I going to get mine? But it's fact is, you don't need that celebration because you were already there. You already should know the word. So you should be willing to embrace that person that's coming into the fold because they're coming back. you're going to get your reward. Your reward's going to be in heaven. But if you're here for the accolades, if you're here for the show, if you're here to put on a front, and if you're here for the moment, then you're in the wrong business, because Christianity is all about welcoming others. We should be going towards the Great Commission, building disciples. What is the second greatest commandment? The second greatest commandment, love thy neighbor like you love yourself. So we should be helping others, but instead, we're too caught up in me, me, me. One of the biggest things that could hurt a church, and it's like you're deeply involved. You're deeply involved in your ministry. And you're like, I need to do this for my ministry. I need to do this because this is my ministry. And it's like the other ministries don't matter to you. And you're like, oh, I don't have to do that. That's not my ministry. No, it is your ministry, because at the end of the day, the mission, we're all working towards one mission. We're all working towards one goal. We're all here to work towards the same thing. And what's that same thing? Building disciples, making disciples, loving each other, lifting them up, being with them. And as we get there, big word, compassion. Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and really see what they're going through. And when you are in any ministry, whether, especially if you are a ministry leader, the one thing that you need to understand is that when you're in that ministry and you're working within that ministry, even if you're saying, you know what, I want to do this and I want to do that, the reality is that ministry that you're in, it's really not for you. That ministry that you're in is for the people who are coming through the door. So sometimes you can't get stuck in the things that you're doing, saying, this is what I want to do. This is what I think is best. But you need to look at who's there and do it for them. Because by doing it for them, you're going to be able to build more disciples and you're going to bring them in. Same thing with worship. If you're worshiping, you're not worshiping for you, but you're worshiping to help usher the congregants in and bring them in. It's anything. And one thing about being in ministry or being a ministry leader is that you have to be the biggest servant leader. So even though you might think, listen, I run this ministry, I'm in charge, you need to be the first one in and the last one out. You need to be the one who's praying for your ministry behind the scenes. You need to be the one who's constantly on your knees. And here's the biggest word. You need to be the biggest servant leader. So you need to serve. You're not here to be served, but you're here to serve. And how many of us like to serve? How many of us are saying, you know what? That's the bigger picture. One thing that I go through within youth ministry, and I enjoy it, is dealing with parents. And the parents, there are parents out there that are saying, you know what? And they think they're a bother because they're saying, you know what? My kid is going through this. My son is going through that. My daughter is going through this. And they think that they're bothering someone. But you're not bothering anybody. Because the truth is, I love youth ministry. I love all Next Gen ministries. But I myself, I don't live with your kids. So you know your kids better than I do. So if they're going through something, you bring it to us. And if it's something deep, then it comes to a point where it's like, you know what, God? I might have had A, B, and C planned for the ministry, but we throw agendas out the window because you're moving us in this direction. And if this is the direction that you want us to move in, then that's the direction, because this is what they're dealing with at home, whether it's mental health, whether it's not being loved enough, whether it's not being promoted enough, or they're just hurting. So then we get out of the norms of what we want to do, and we have to go towards the thing that's best for the ministry. So when you are serving, keep in mind of that. Same thing as we talked about earlier, compassion, outreach. When you're doing things such as Hope Day, just keep in mind of who's coming through to the event and what people are going through, because you never know what's happening in somebody's life. Same thing, whereas I know there might be people who have road rage. Now, road rage, I could have a lot of road rage. Somebody cuts you off, and then you get into the flesh like, you know what? How you going to test me today? I can't believe they ran that red light. I can't believe they cut me off on the highway. Oh, but movement thinking would be like, you know what? Person cut me off, but why did they cut me off? What if a person cut you off and you're too busy in your flesh and you're too busy thinking about, why'd they do this, and you're ready to la 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 la, but deep down they had to rush to the hospital, but you don't know that. Or they just experienced the loss of a loved one, or they're going through something, and there's a reason why they did what they did. But you don't know that because you're stuck in your own moment, but you're not ready to see the movement of what's really happening. So that's why it's up to us to just take a deep breath and just look beyond what's on the outside, because people are hurting and going through things on the inside. And then another story in which somebody would need to touch Jesus. And this is one of the best examples of somebody who touched Jesus. And this comes out of Luke chapter 8, verses 43 to 48. Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any. So you had this woman, and she was bleeding. She was bleeding. And for 12 years, she was bleeding. And she paid everything she had to doctors, and it didn't work. She did everything she wanted to do, tried to do, and it didn't work. And in the same way that the lepers, how we talked about lepers, how they screamed unclean, outcast in society, this woman couldn't be near anybody, had to be away from people, had to be totally away, unclean. A woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter and all those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceive power going out from me." Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all that the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." So you have this woman, and she was constantly and consistently bleeding. There was no other answer for her healing. She did everything she could within the world. She paid doctors. She spent everything. But then she sees this big crowd. And in the midst of this crowd, she sees Jesus. And her way of thinking is that she needed to do whatever she could to get to this man. Can you imagine that you're at a concert and you see your friends, they're like far off, and you see them, and you're trying to get to your friends at the concert, but then all these people are around and you can't get to your friends? Think of that bigger scale. So this woman had to find any way she could to get to this man. And she broke through the crowd, and she just touched the hem of his garment, just touched the garment. And at the moment that she touched him is the moment that she got healed. And Jesus was at that point, and he said, "Who touched me?" See, it didn't matter It didn't matter that there was crowds around him, but he focused on the one that touched him, because that's the kind of Jesus that we have. So if you look at that situation, and if you're looking at the prodigal son, where the master says, you know what, bring him in. You know what the key element in both of these things are? Is that it doesn't matter about everybody else. When there's a need, when there's somebody in need, he's there. He's there. The 99 doesn't matter. You chase after the one. And when you chase after the one and they get healed and they get saved, that's a big occasion. It's a lot better for one person to get saved than nobody gets saved at all. And that's the kind of thinking that we need. So instead of get into thinking where we're like, you know what, we need to do things on a big scale. Maybe we have to worry about the fluff. Maybe we have to worry about all these things. Or we do things and it's like, only 40 people showed up. Only 5 people showed up. But if 40 people showed up and 20 got saved, or if 10 people showed up and 5 got saved, that's half your people right there. That's building more disciples than anything. So stop worrying about the big numbers and start focusing on the hearts of people. And we need to be desperate. We need to, as I said before, we need to ask. We need to seek. We need to knock. This woman said, you know what? I need to do whatever it takes to get to Jesus. I need to break through the crowd and I need to touch him. And that's the kind of attitude that we need to have as Christians. We need to continuously be at a point where we say, you know what? I just need to touch him. I just need to be there with him. I just want a piece of him. And that brings me to the solution to the question. Because I asked before, I could have easily said, you know what? I need to touch Jesus. I need to get touched by Jesus. But quite often, we're too focused on getting ours first. Like, I need to get touched. I need to get touched. But instead, we need to be so hungry that we need to go about touching Jesus so that he can touch us, so that we can go out and touch others. So that's the solution to the question. So the solution to the question is that we need to, or the answer is that we need to touch the master in order to receive his touch so that we can touch others. And this brings us to Philippians 3:12 to 16. So how do we go on about touching the master? What's the big secret? What's the big answer? How do we go about doing this? Is this something that we are going to achieve in our lifetime? Is this something that's going to happen overnight? No, it's movement-based thinking. It's not moment. It's not something that's going to be like, one and done, we're there. It's something that we continue to grow and we continue to move towards. It says in Philippians 3, verses 12 to 16, and the worship team, you guys can start making your way up. But it says, not that I have already obtained or am already perfect, but I press on, that I may lay hold of that for which Christ Jesus has also laid for me. Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended, but one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, but reaching forward to those things which are ahead. I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Therefore, let us, as many are mature, have this mind. And if in anything you think otherwise, God will reveal this even to you. Nevertheless, to the degree that we have already attained, let us walk by the same rule, and let us be of the same mind. So, it's something that we're always going to continue to do. We should always be desperate where we touch Jesus so we get touched so we can touch others. It's something that we may not finish. We're not going to finish in our lifetime, but that should be what you apply every single day of your life. You got to continue to press on. You need to continue to go for it. You need to continue just to be that light. You need to have movement thinking. Forget about the moments. Moments are great, but let's focus on movement. Is Madison Martin here? Is she in the sanctuary? Oh. Come here. Movement thinking. So this young lady, when she was in 10th grade, we were at a youth convention, and they asked who here wants to be basically like a campus missionary. And what's a campus missionary? It's someone who says, you know what, I'm going to take a stand to be bold, and I'm going to go to my school and I'm going to start a Christian club. 10th grade, so she was only 16 at the time. That summer, we introduced her to our Youth Alive rep for the state, and she went about going through the process of how to get that done. She got that club done. And now today, as she goes on, and she's a senior, but that's all those years of her reaching out to her school and saying, you know what, it's not about me, it's about others. And it's about leaving behind not an impression, but an influence. Not being here for the moment, but creating a movement of what you're going to do in the school. And she's just one of many. And as we go to these, I was at a pastor's meeting this past week, and she was actually highlighted in the video where they have all the pastors in the room are seeing it. And it's a video that they use for New York State of the example of what's happening in Baldwin. And she's just an example. Thank you so much, Madison. We have, and I'm shouting them out because these kids were only 16 when they did this. We have Jayla, who Terry's granddaughter, who's in the process of starting that as well. Movement. We have our very own Jeremiah playing the guitar right now, or bass, who lives all the way in Bayshore, Brentwood School District, but it's Bayshore to me. And every single week, it just seems like he brings a new person to youth group. Movement, not about him, but it's about those that follow. And it started with his friend Justin, and then it became DeMarcus, and then it became Fernando, and then he just brought a friend named Jason. And this is all the way from Brentwood, So my thing is that if 16-year-olds are doing this, and the youth are doing this, why can't we be in a point where we can do this? Why can't we be at a point where we say, you know what, the next generation, they're building up the church. And we, as Christians, we need to build the church. And we need to build it up to a point where we're not looking down on people when they come through to the doors with a problem. We're not looking down at the drunks. We're not looking down at the drug addicts. We're not here to look down, but we're here to help rehabilitate. We're here to get our touch so that we can touch others. So we're here to touch him so we can get our touch so that we can touch others. And when they get touched, those others get touched, they're going to end up touching other people, and they're all going to come into the fold. And that's how your church gets built. And at the end of the day, we are the church. So don't be judgmental, and don't worry about your moment. Don't worry about your personal accolades, but be there for a movement. Now, how many of you are here today and you say, you know what, I may have been caught up in my own moment. I may have been here and I'm too worried about the fluff, or I'm too worried about what I'm doing, but I really need to get out of myself and worry about, I need to get to movement thinking. If that is you and you say, you know what, I want to be part of the movement, I want to be part of the mission, then I just urge you just to come up here. We're going to have our prayer team. Prayer team is going to pray over you guys so you can make your ways up. And is there anyone in here who says, you know what? This man that you talked about, this master that would leave the 10 behind, that would leave the 99 behind for the one, and you never accepted Christ in your life. Is there anyone who has never accepted him into your life? Anyone in the building right now? If not, you can make your way up. But if you're going through something and you want to be part of the movement, come up. Our worship team is going to sing, and then we're going to pray over you guys.